My name is Josephine. I'm 21 years old, and I've just started my freshman year at a university in Michigan that I'd quietly dreamed about for years. I thought I finally had the chance to live like a normal person, to study, make friends, and decide my own life. But in that very first week of orientation, everything collapsed like a real nightmare. My mother, Caroline, suddenly appeared at the dorm room door, dragging a heavy suitcase. Inside weren't gifts or supplies, but rows of pill packs, syringes, and a folder full of forged medical records. She told the school staff I was out of control, that I was very dangerous if not treated immediately. And when I screamed in denial, she simply smiled, pulled out a folder stamped with a court seal, and said she'd been granted emergency guardianship. Before I could even understand what was happening, she took out a syringe and stepped toward me, calm as if it were just another routine dose. I thought I was about to be cut off from the world, from freedom, from myself, until campus police rushed in. Have you ever been treated by the very person who gave birth to you as though you weren't even human? If you're watching this video, leave a comment below, share your thoughts, hit like, and subscribe to the channel to follow my journey to reclaim my life. The journey I'm about to tell you from the very beginning. I can't forget my mother's eyes when the police entered. She wasn't frantic, she didn't yell, she only pressed her lips tight, as if she were the one being wronged. As if injecting her own daughter in the middle of a dormitory was perfectly reasonable, and my resistance was the true offense. I had lived under that gaze for over 20 years, the gaze of someone who believed she had the right to dictate everything about me, from emotions to thoughts to existence itself. It all began long ago. When I was very small, my mother divided our lives into three sealed boxes. Miranda, my older sister, was the successful one. Even in kindergarten, she wore pencil skirts, memorized the names of Ivy League schools, and practiced speaking with adults. Every time she scored high, my mother threw a celebration, invited neighbors to brag, and even printed out her essays to pin on the fridge like a declaration. Lucas, my younger brother, was the strong one. Mother signed him up for Pee Wee football at age 4. Whenever he fell, she never helped him up. She folded her arms and said, "Stand up, strength doesn't need help." He was never allowed to cry, not even when he broke his arm. She only called the doctor after making sure he had learned the lesson of endurance. And me, I was stuck with the last label, the stupid one, worthless, with no future. She said I was born underweight, cried too much, developed slowly, and that meant I'd never do anything of value. I wasn't allowed to learn to swim because an idiot will never manage. I couldn't play piano like Miranda because an idiot would only ruin the sound. I couldn't go to summer camp like Lucas because an idiot shouldn't leave. Home, she'll get lost. I once thought if I tried hard enough, she'd change her mind. But whenever I succeeded, solved a difficult math problem, earned an A on an essay, she grew furious. She tore my notebooks apart, blamed Miranda for teaching me wrong, then locked me in a dark room for hours with only a small bottle of water and the warning, "Don't dream. You're not smart enough to dream." For a long time I believed her. How could someone like me be intelligent when every proof showed I was always the disappointment? Yet deep down, I knew I wasn't stupid. I loved books. I secretly reread Miranda's essays and even corrected a few logic errors. But when Mother found out, she burned everything I'd written and forced me to kneel in the kitchen for 2 hours with a kind of logic board around my neck that read, "I am a dreamer." I never asked why she needed those labels. It seemed to her that assigning each child a fixed role was the only way to control, to preserve what she called the family ecosystem. If one person broke out of line, everything would fall apart. She said that to me when I was 9, after I asked why I couldn't take the same exam as my classmates. My father once opposed her. When I was 7, he stood up during dinner, pushed his chair back, and told her, "Caroline, you're killing this child piece by piece." She didn't react. She just turned to me and said, "See? The only man who ever defended you just walked away, because you're a burden. I remember quietly clearing his plate from the table, hollow inside. From then on, everything only worsened. With no one to stop her, Mother tightened her grip. Miranda wasn't allowed personal hobbies, only what Mother chose. Lucas was forced to train every morning until his knees swelled, and me, I became her punching bag whenever anyone else slipped. That stupid girl messed up again. Her catchphrase, even when it had nothing to do with me. Sometimes I wondered, if I had been an only child, would she still have created such a system? Or did three children simply give her the excuse to construct a game where she alone wrote the rules? Miranda once tried to resist. When she applied to join the art club in high school, Mother ripped the form in front of her, then forced her to rewrite a success plan exactly as Mother dictated. Lucas once begged for a day off because of shoulder pain. Mother called the doctor not to treat him, but to demand supplements to recover faster and keep training. As for me, by age 9, Mother made me swallow a pale blue pill every morning, claiming it would steady my brain. Years later, I learned it was a mild sedative, usually prescribed to adults with delusional disorders. I wasn't sick. I was just a child asking too many questions at the wrong time. In the years that followed, I learned to keep silent, lower my head, move slowly, and most of all, never show that I understood more than my role as the stupid one. But children always find ways to survive. We, Miranda, Lucas, and I created what we called finger language, just small hand signals to talk when Mother was nearby. A light tap on the table meant okay. 2 fingers extended meant danger. 3 taps on the arm meant meet tonight. On quiet nights when Mother slept, we gathered in the basement, whispering our dreams. Miranda wanted to be an interior designer. Lucas dreamed of professional sports. And me, I just wanted to go to school like everyone else. I never thought that tiny dream was what terrified Mother most. But now I understand. Knowledge was the one thing she couldn't control. And when a child labeled stupid began showing she could think, the entire system she built would collapse. Maybe that's why Caroline showed up at my dorm that day with her suitcase full of drugs, forged records, and chilling determination to shove me back into the same box she'd trapped me in all my childhood. But I wasn't that child anymore, and she wasn't the only one in control. I still remember those pills she forced on me every morning. No smell, pale blue, smooth, neatly placed in a white tray beside a glass of water. She never let me forget. Rain or shine, fever or headache, birthday or Christmas, it was always that pill, and her unwavering stare as I swallowed. "This medicine keeps you safe," she always said, voice flat, expressionless. I was never allowed to ask what it was. Once, when I dared, she pressed my shoulder down hard and whispered in my ear, as if sharing a great secret, "Girls like you who don't take medicine eventually hurt themselves. I'm saving you." Caroline had been a nurse for over 20 years. She had a license, contacts with private doctors, and knew how to slip through loopholes to obtain drugs others needed prescriptions for. At home, no one could open the medicine cabinet but her. We always suspected, but never had proof until I began suffering unexplained dizziness, a racing heart even when I wasn't active, and a memory that turned fragmented. I didn't dare tell anyone. I was afraid I was hallucinating, or worse, that she was right, and the medicine was the only thing keeping me normal. While I drifted through that fog, Miranda lived behind a rigid mask called perfect. Mother imposed a suffocating schedule. Up at 6 a.m. to study. At 8 to take tests, she wrote. At 10 to practice music. At noon to read philosophy. At 2 to rehearse English speeches. Miranda wasn't allowed to cry, get angry, or even look tired. Whenever she failed even slightly mispronouncing a French word or hitting a wrong piano note, Mother gave a cold smile and said, "Don't make me regret choosing you as the successful one." I once caught Miranda locked in the bathroom, water running loudly but not loud enough to hide her muffled sobs. She didn't cry out, just shook, clutching the sink as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Lucas was forced into his own mold, the strong one. Mother turned the garage into a gym. At 5, he lifted plastic weights. By 8, they were metal. Some days he trained until his arms gave out, but she still made him stand, forbidding him to sit. "Real men don't rest midway," she said, while fastening more weights around his waist. Once Lucas fell down the stairs, back scraped, knees bleeding, lips blue. I panicked, ran for Mother, but she only looked from afar and said, "Get up. You're the pillar of this ecosystem. If you fall, everything collapses." And he stood. Not for her, but because Miranda and I were watching, knowing if Lucas fell, we'd be next. We lived like prisoners with assigned roles. But in the shadows of control, we created our own world. At first, it was just glances, then winks, then taps, until our language formed. A light touch on the wrist meant, okay. 2 taps on the table meant, we need to talk. Spinning a pen between fingers meant, Mother is watching. Once Miranda created a slow triple blink, meaning, be careful, she's suspicious. We used it every day at dinner, in the car, even at night, when her footsteps echoed down the wooden hallway like a countdown to rage. There were nights Miranda shook me awake at 2 a.m., handing me a book. "I have only 30 minutes. Learn this section quickly. Tomorrow Mother will test me, so I can't teach again." I devoured every page under the dim lamp as if those words were the only lifeline I had. Lucas hid a few sports manuals, a city map, taxi numbers, and train schedules inside an old shoebox. He never said it outright, but I knew Lucas was preparing. Not just for himself, but for us. I used to think 3 children couldn't possibly resist Caroline. She had medical credentials, and she knew how to convince others she was a devoted mother to 3 developmentally challenged kids. But sometimes even the smallest slip, a hospital helicopter schedule left lying around, a medicine bottle with a strange label, or a phone call between her and a stranger I overheard, gave me hope that truth couldn't stay buried forever. Miranda once whispered to me with her face pressed against the second-floor window late at night, "If one day you get out, Josephine, you have to go far, far away. And don't you ever look back." I remembered those words the day Caroline appeared at my dorm, syringe in hand, calling my name as if it were the last moment she still had ownership of me. But in that moment, under the white lights and the icy tone in her voice, I was no longer the child she had branded. I was no longer afraid of her words. "This medicine will put you back in your place." I was 15 when I first thought about leaving that house. Not because I was brave, but because I was too exhausted to keep living as a nameless shadow. A shadow only allowed to exist if it stayed silent, obedient, and utterly stupid. The idea of escaping came from Lucas. He had been planning it for nearly a year without anyone knowing. Every night, after Caroline turned off the lights and locked our doors, Lucas would sneak into my room, whispering each step. The map of interstate bus routes, the money he saved secretly washing cars for neighbors, and a folded map so small it could fit in the palm of a hand. "I checked already," Lucas told me one summer night, his voice low and steady. "The bus leaves at 5 a.m. from Southfield Station. If you agree, we can go within the next 2 weeks. I've hidden shoes, water, and bags under the old bed in the shed." I stayed quiet for a long time. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I had never dared to imagine a life without Mother controlling each breath. "I'll go," I whispered, my voice dry as if even speaking it aloud was an unforgivable sin. We agreed on Saturday morning, when the whole house would still be asleep. Miranda knew. She didn't say much, only slipped a small book into my backpack with some bills tucked between its pages. "If you make it somewhere safe, study. Don't let anyone shut your mind again." The night before we left, I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the ticking clock, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would wake the house. At dawn, Lucas tapped the door 3 times the signal. We crept out the back, across dew-soaked grass, carrying 2 backpacks and fragile hope that no one would notice. A silver-gray bus waited at the end of the street, its engine still warm, the driver smoking under a tree. I stepped up first. Lucas handed over our tickets, his fingers pale from gripping too tightly. Everything seemed fine until the driver asked to check the names. Lucas Brennan and Josie Fisher? He frowned at me. Where's your guardian? Who are you traveling with? Before I could answer, the sharp sound of heels struck the pavement behind us. Fast. Certain? I turned. Caroline stood less than 10 steps away, her hair pinned tightly back, her white nurse's blouse still stained with antiseptic, her eyes locked on me. Not angry. Not trembling, just a hollow stare so cold it froze me in place. "I'm sorry," she said to the driver, her voice syrupy sweet, so unlike anything I had ever heard at home. "These two children suffer from severe cognitive disorders. I'm their legal guardian. They ran away while I was preparing their medication." Lucas stepped in front of me. "We're not sick. You don't have the right." His words were cut short by the crack of her hand across his face. The slap echoed like a whip. I lunged to catch him as he stumbled back. The driver froze, speechless. Caroline yanked me toward her, clamping my wrist with a strength I never knew a woman could have. "You're coming home, now," she hissed, so low only I could hear. "I put a tracker in your shoes last month. Don't think I don't know what you're fantasizing about." On the way back, I didn't cry. Lucas didn't speak. We sat in the back seat like shadows shoved back into the box we thought we'd broken free from. And then the punishments began. Lucas was forced to drag sandbags weighing nearly 200 pounds from the shed to the far end of the yard, again and again, until he collapsed. He lay trembling in sweat, his legs spasming, while Caroline watched without blinking. Miranda was locked in her study room, no light, no food, just stacks of exams and a countdown clock. Mother said she couldn't leave until she finished all of them in 20 hours. I didn't hear her voice for 3 days. As for me, I was strapped to the kitchen chair by my left wrist, so I wouldn't run. In front of me was a thick notebook and a pen. On the first page she had written one line, "I am stupid and worthless." She made me copy it 10,000 times, every letter exact. Whenever I paused to wipe my aching hand, she tore out the page and made me start over. By the third day, my skin split open, my fingers numb. But the pain wasn't the worst part. It was her eyes when she said, "You need constant reminders so you don't forget your true role." Then she placed the familiar pill on the table. "If you're obedient, I'll lower the dose," she said. "You don't want to start dreaming again, do you?" I stared at that pill like it was a sentence. I had failed. We had failed. But something inside me had shifted since that bus station morning. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was only waiting. Because I knew once you get that close to freedom, no one can cage you forever. After that failed escape, I stopped being the child desperate for forgiveness. I became quiet, cautious, obedient enough that Caroline believed I had truly accepted my role. She didn't suspect when I carried meals to Lucas or picked up a broom. She didn't see that silence was my cover, and in it, I was beginning a rebellion she could never contain. I started studying again at night, when everyone was asleep. Miranda slipped me an old laptop under my mattress, the one her teacher had once lent her for SAT prep. The screen was cracked, a few keys missing, but it worked. We only dared use the Wi-Fi at 2 a.m., when Caroline was knocked out on her sleeping pills. Lucas built a false wall in the shed, behind which I studied. He pulled an extension cord from the kitchen, hung a dim bulb, and propped a chair on bricks as a desk. "Don't turn it too bright," Lucas warned. "She likes to walk in the garden at 3:30. At first, I barely understood anything. Math formulas, long passages, science concepts from 7th grade, they felt foreign. But I read, then reread, then memorized. Even though my brain was foggy from years of sedatives, even when letters swam before my eyes, I forced myself awake, splashing my face with cold water every 10 minutes. Miranda slipped multivitamins into Mother's pill bottles for me, She even recopied her old essays for me to practice writing. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We all knew no one was coming to save us. Freedom had to be taken piece by piece, just like I clawed back every memory buried under 10 years of drugs and insults. One stormy night, I registered for the GED practice exam online. My hands shook as I typed my name, terrified the system would reject me or mother would somehow find out. But then the screen flashed. Your test date has been confirmed. It took me 6 months to prepare. On freezing winter nights, I wore 2 layers, fingerless gloves, focusing hour after hour on the material. Lucas built soundproofing in the shed so mother wouldn't hear the keyboard. Miranda faked illness to distract her, buying me precious time. On exam day, I packed the laptop and my notebook into a backpack and walked nearly 4 miles to the public library, the only place with approved computers and cameras for monitoring the test. On the way, I imagined every disaster. Caroline waiting outside, Lucas exposed, Miranda interrogated, but nothing happened. I sat at the computer, hands icy, eyes on the countdown. You have 3 hours to complete the GED. I don't remember how I answered. I only remember sitting frozen after submitting, unable to move. I felt like I had committed something forbidden not because of cheating, but because I dared believe I could succeed. 2 weeks later, Miranda appeared at the shed door with an envelope. Inside was a printed email. Congratulations, you have earned your GED. Total score, 684. I sank to the cold floor, clutching the paper, my chest tight. Miranda didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, placed a hand on my shoulder, and exhaled softly. This is the last time I let her decide who I am, I whispered. From then on, I began researching colleges with programs for independent students. Miranda reached out to a former teacher for guidance. It took me almost a month to finish my personal essay, one that didn't mention mother but carried the weight of all the silence I'd lived through. Lucas snuck me to the post office in the next town. He had faked losing a birth certificate to get a new one under my initials, keeping it hidden from mother. With that identity, I applied to Michigan State University, majoring in psychology, hoping to understand how a mother could build an entire system of control. When the admission letter was delivered to the town's communal mailbox, Lucas retrieved it. I was in the shed reading an essay when he burst in, waving the envelope with the university seal. There's a letter, Lucas said, his voice breaking. Your name's on it. I froze. Moments later, Miranda walked in, eyes red. I opened it. The words stood out clear against the white. We are pleased to welcome you to Michigan State University. The 3 of us embraced in the small shed, no words. We were too used to silence, too afraid any sound might alert Caroline. I left home one August evening. Miranda faked a migraine, demanding to be taken to the ER. Lucas dropped a weight on his foot, screaming to distract. I slipped out the back door, backpack strapped tight, admission letter pressed to my chest. Before crossing the gate, I turned back. The house lay in darkness, but I no longer belonged to it. I promised myself I would not fail. Never again. I arrived at the dorm on a Sunday evening in mid-August. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass, car horns drifted from afar, sparrows settled into trees. I dragged my old suitcase across the stone path, my heart heavy as if shedding an entire life. The housing staff handed me keys and rules, but my eyes stayed fixed on the door, marked Bachamwe High. That was where I would begin again. No pills. No chalkboard declaring me stupid. No Caroline watching every move. I unpacked carefully, placed the admission letter on the desk like a talisman, hung photos of Miranda and Lucas by the shelf. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, stunned that I was breathing between walls without hidden microphones, cameras, or double-locked doors. I fell asleep without nightmares, without swallowing a pill just to dream. For a whole week, I lived as someone new. I went to class on time, ate breakfast with my roommate, visited the library, took notes, debated in class. My psychology professor called my name, and I spoke up. No one laughed. No one asked if I had cognitive limitations. I was called by my name, Josephine, not a role my mother had written. On the seventh day since moving in, I received a text from Lucas. Just 2 words. Be careful. My heart pounded. I stood from my desk, scanning the quiet room. My roommate had gone home for the weekend. The hallway was empty. I typed back, "What's going on?" But there was no reply. That afternoon, I had just stepped out of my philosophy class when I saw a familiar figure standing at the end of the hallway. Lucas. An old hoodie, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes down. I ran toward him, thinking he had escaped, but the moment I touched his shoulder, I heard the click of heels behind me. Caroline. She stood right at the main entrance, pulling that same black suitcase I knew too well. In her hand was a thick file tied neatly with string. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't even breathe. It felt like the air around me had been sucked out in a single instant. "Did you think I wouldn't find you?" Caroline stepped closer, her voice light as mist. "The school sent a medical report. They were wondering why a psychiatric patient had no legal guardian." I turned to Lucas. His eyes avoided mine, as though he was trying to say something but couldn't. "She said she'd send files about Miranda to the administration if I didn't cooperate," he whispered, eyes red. "She said she'd report Miranda for faking credentials, for deceiving her professor. She's already drafted the email." I stepped back, but Caroline was faster. She opened the suitcase. Inside was a full medical kit, syringe, cotton, antiseptic, and a cold plastic bag holding small unlabeled vials. She raised a paper with a seal. "Emergency guardianship order from Dr. Harold Westfield. Signed this morning. You have no right to make decisions anymore." I turned to run, but Lucas held my shoulders. "She brought court officials. If you don't go, she'll really hurt Miranda." "Lucas, let me go," I whispered. "I'm sorry. I can't." Caroline moved closer, uncapping the syringe. I struggled, but Lucas pinned my arms behind my back the way she had trained him to. My head spun, childhood memories flooding in. The cold kitchen, the accusing lines, the pills, and the reek of antiseptic that had stained my past. "You won't remember anything," Caroline murmured. "Just a few small adjustments to your brain. Then you'll be calm, obedient, like before." The needle touched my skin when the door burst open. A security officer named Kia Nash, the one I had met during enrollment, charged in, hand on her radio. "Get your hands off her," she barked, stepping forward like a shield. "I got the report. There's no one here in need of injections." Caroline withdrew, quickly stuffing the syringe into the pocket of her white blouse. "I'm her mother. I have the right. She's not well. I have medical records. And I have security footage, student statements, and an order from administration to investigate trespassing." Kia countered, eyes locked on Caroline. Lucas let go. I collapsed to the floor, back against the wall, trembling all over. My throat was too dry to... Kia turned to me, her voice gentler. "Are you okay?" I nodded, tears already streaming. "She has drugs in her bag. Syringes. Fake papers." Kia motioned for her team. They restrained Caroline and ordered her to put the bag on the table. Caroline screamed, "You're tearing my family apart. She's sick. She's lying." Kia didn't flinch. She opened the bag, pulled out the syringe, and ordered her partner to take it to the lab. "We'll test this. For now, you're coming with us to campus security headquarters." Caroline didn't resist. She only turned back, her gray eyes like steel, colder than winter. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "No one escapes the ecosystem without paying the price." I stayed on the floor, heart pounding like a drum. Kia crouched beside me. "She can't hurt you anymore. We know now. Do you want to call city police?" I nodded. "I need a lawyer. I need evidence. I need them to believe me, that I'm not insane." Kia squeezed my hand gently. "I believe you, and I won't let this disappear." I didn't know what the future would hold. But in that moment, in the arms of a stranger brave enough to stand in front of me, I understood. As long as I could still rise, Caroline could never silence me again. I sat alone in the small security office, hugging a thin coat around me though the air conditioning was low. My head still throbbed from the shock of Caroline's grip. The feeling of the needle grazing my skin hadn't faded when the door opened, and a young woman walked in carrying a black file case. She wore a simple shirt, neat, her hair tied back, her steps brisk, but her eyes strangely warm. "Amanda Rhodes," she said, offering her hand. "Attorney from the Community Legal Center. I'll represent you if you agree." I shook her hand, forcing my voice steady. "I need someone who believes I'm not insane." Amanda didn't smile, didn't nod out of courtesy. She simply opened her case, pulled out a stack of documents, and said softly, "Then, let's begin with the truth." About an hour later, a plainclothes police officer entered. His name was Elias Harris, an investigator assigned by the city since the case now involved criminal elements beyond campus jurisdiction. He looked about 50, deep-set eyes, slow voice, sharp in every detail. The room grew heavier as he opened his notebook and began asking questions. I told everything from my childhood, the assigned roles, the family ecosystem, the pills, our failed escape, to how I secretly studied for the GED and left with Miranda and Lucas's help. I left nothing out, even the shameful parts believing Mother might change, or thinking I really was cognitively impaired. When I reached the syringe incident, Amanda's hand rested lightly on the table's edge, as if urging me to keep going. Detective Harris wrote steadily, sometimes nodding, sometimes frowning at irregular details like how my mother had obtained emergency guardianship from a doctor in just a few hours. "I need the drug samples and images of the syringe," he said. "We'll send them for independent testing. I'll work with administration to collect entry logs and footage." Amanda immediately handed him a list. Photos of the red mark on my arm, copies of the forged paperwork, texts Lucas sent from her phone, and images of the suitcase full of medical equipment. All had been stored on a hard drive that Kia Nash had extracted that very day. "She has a lawyer," I said quietly. "A famous one in the state." "We know," Amanda replied. "She's also hired a PR team, painting herself as a desperate mother trying to save her self-destructive daughter." I let out a hollow laugh. "And the public will believe it." "Maybe," she admitted, "but courts don't rule on online sympathy. We have evidence, and we have time." Caroline didn't wait. Just one day after being ordered off campus, she posted a long statement to her thousands of followers. A mother's fight against a system that abandoned her mentally ill daughter. She shared childhood photos of me, a spliced clip of me stumbling in the yard back when I was still drugged, and claimed I was spiraling because I was denied treatment. Comments flooded in, pity, anger, curses. Some even messaged me directly, calling me ungrateful, insisting no mother would harm her child. I turned off notifications, but every word cut deep, like small blades slicing into what little calm I had left. Amanda wasn't surprised. "She's waging a war of opinion. We'll stay with the law. Brace yourself, it'll get harder." Detective Harris checked the name Dr. Harold Westfield, the one who signed her guardianship papers. Within 48 hours, we had confirmation. Forged. The administration that supposedly authorized it had never issued guardianship in my name. The signature didn't match records. The evidence began to align. Amanda compiled carefully. Forged documents. Syringe prepared but unused. Bruises on my wrist from Lucas holding me. Kia Nash's testimony on unusual behavior. Pharmacy logs from Caroline's former workplace. Library footage of me studying and taking the GED. Proof I cared for myself and lived independently on campus. "We're not just fighting an overbearing mother," Amanda said while typing the report. "We're fighting a system she built over 2 decades to control 3 children, proving it won't be easy. But it's possible." I sat at the computer, drafting a petition for emergency protection from abuse, the first draft Amanda prepared. My hands shook as I wrote the reason. I fear my biological mother will continue trying to drug me or illegally commit me. When I hit submit, a breath escaped my chest like releasing a fear carried since childhood. But I knew this was only the beginning. To step fully into the light, I would have to peel back every shadow she had laid over my life. I had just left Amanda's office when my phone buzzed. A text from Miranda. Only 2 words. Turn on. I rushed to my dorm, locked the door, pulled the curtains, and called. On the screen, Miranda appeared, eyes tense. She was standing in the shed behind the house, our old secret place. But behind her was a large dusty box, marked with a tilted red G. I found it, Miranda said, voice low. It was under the old filing cabinet, covered by tarp. She never mentioned it. Yesterday, while she was out, I searched the whole house. She lowered the camera to show me. An old wooden chest with a rusted lock. She pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were hundreds of pages. Printed sheets, handwritten notes, small journals, behavioral charts, mood graphs, penciled annotations, all in Caroline's slanted but clear handwriting. Miranda lifted them layer by layer. I saw the first title, Role Coordination Strategy, Brennan Family, Haingin Lernum. The next page was a chart, Miranda, Guide, Lucas, Pillar, Josephine, Balance. Each name had a chart, estimated IQ, behavior tendencies, emotional expressions, resistance level, drug compliance. I could barely breathe seeing my name summarized in 3 blunt lines. Unstable, easily agitated without control, best suited for early neurological intervention. What is this? I asked, gripping my chair. Miranda hesitated, then pulled out a thicker file bound with rubber bands. On the cover, in bold letters, Cognitive Adjustment Plan, Dr. Malcolm Grant. Below was a signature and a seal from a clinic in Indiana. He's the doctor she mentioned when I was 15, Miranda said, flipping the first page. She said if I kept drawing, kept showing misguided creativity, I'd have to go get my thinking adjusted. Inside were detailed documents on minor neurological procedures, temporary, anesthesia, cortical suppressant injections, even limited invasive methods for teens difficult to manage. Many sections were highlighted in red, annotated by my mother, suitable for J. Perform before age 20 for maximum effect. I froze. Not just because Caroline had actually planned to tamper with my brain, but because she had preserved it all, cold and methodical, written down, calculated step by step, year by year. Amanda could hardly believe it when I sent her photos of the entire file by email. Less than 20 minutes later, she called me back on video, her face more serious than I had ever seen. Do you know Dr. Grant was sued back in 2013 in Missouri? Amanda pulled up an old news page. He was accused of performing unlicensed behavioral adjustment procedures on minors without legal consent. The case was dropped halfway through because the family silenced the victim with a financial settlement, but his name stayed on the state medical board's watch list. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. So that means my mother contacted someone with a history of illegal methods? I asked. Amanda nodded, then straightened. Not just contacted. She planned it, kept the documents, wrote detailed notes. This is evidence of premeditation for actions that could qualify as severe abuse. We immediately sent the entire file to Detective Harris. He didn't say much, only asked Miranda to preserve the scene exactly as it was. An hour later, a team from the police department arrived at my house with an emergency search warrant signed by a judge. Caroline wasn't there. She was in another city attending a conference on cognitive rehabilitation in adolescence. Lucas had quietly tracked it from her email calendar and forwarded it to Amanda using his private account. Miranda later told me the police spent almost 4 hours collecting and sealing the files, notebooks covered in scribbled notes, stacks of prescriptions without patient names, receipts for medical supplies, and correspondence between my mother and Dr. Grant's clinic, all packed into 4 boxes labeled organized criminal evidence. That evening, I called Lucas. His face lit up the screen, this time calmer than in the last few days. "You're really about to get out, aren't you?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, my brother, who had been turned into a tool of strength, who once held me down so our mother could inject me, who had lived torn between loyalty and awakening. And I understood that freedom wasn't about running. Freedom was facing the past head-on and choosing never to turn back. "We're not free yet," I said. "But at least this time we have a map." Lucas nodded gently. "And we have each other." I first sensed something wrong when my backpack suddenly felt heavier than usual. It was the same backpack I'd used since starting college. Simple, just big enough for a few books and the old laptop Miranda had once smuggled to me. But lately, whenever I carried it, there was a dull weight, unusual, like something hidden deep inside the lining. I didn't tell anyone then. Maybe because I was buried under lawsuits, meetings with Amanda, long calls with Miranda about the investigation, and sleepless nights haunted by dreams still smelling of antiseptic. I told myself I was imagining it. I had been taught to doubt my own thoughts for so long that my first instinct was, maybe I'm just being too sensitive. But one Wednesday afternoon, when I returned to my dorm after class, I noticed the lock on my drawer where I kept personal belongings was slightly turned, no sign of forced entry, nothing missing, but I knew I hadn't left it that way. That night, I opened my backpack, flipped up the bottom lining, and saw a seam so carefully stitched it wasn't factory made. With my fingers, I tugged the thread loose, and a small black plastic. The device fell out slightly larger than my thumb, no buttons, no lights, but icy cold to the touch. I brought it to campus security, where Kia Nash was still monitoring my situation. When she saw the object, she didn't ask questions. She just nodded and unlocked a secure drawer. "GPS tracker," Kia said after a quick check. "This isn't sold to the public, needs a code to activate remotely, can transmit within about 10 miles. I sat frozen. "You think Caroline hired someone to put it in my backpack?" Kia didn't answer directly, but her voice sank low. "With your mother, nothing is impossible." The next morning, Amanda and I signed a petition to expand the criminal investigation to include stalking and invasion of privacy. Detective Harris forwarded it to the Cybercrime Division. I thought I had acted early enough, carefully enough. I didn't expect what would happen just 2 days later. It was a Saturday night. My roommate, Shanna, was at the cafeteria with her boyfriend, while I sat alone in the dorm, headphones in, revising my report about the fake guardianship papers Caroline had presented. Outside, drizzle tapped against the window, golden light shimmering across the ceiling. I didn't hear the door open. My room was at the end of the hall, near the emergency stairwell, rarely used. When I pulled out my headphones, the first thing I felt was a chill seeping through the door frame, and the quiet sound of footsteps on the carpet. I turned. A man stood in the middle of my room. Dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low, gloves on, one hand digging in his pocket. Before I could react, he strode toward me. "Josephine Brennan?" His voice was hoarse. I didn't answer. My hand reached for my phone, but he grabbed my wrist and tried to twist it back. I thrashed, screamed, but my voice stuck in my throat. He leaned close, whispering as if soothing me. "It's okay. Dr. Grant just needs a few tests. You'll be back in a few days." Hearing that, names stabbed through my mind. I kicked him in the chest, scrambled toward the door, but he yanked my shirt. We crashed to the floor. I screamed, clawed, shoved with everything I had until the door burst open, and Shanna's scream filled the air. "There's someone in the room. Help!" The dorm alarm blared less than a minute later. The man let go, bolting down the stairwell, only to find Kia Nash waiting. She brought him down with one swift move and cuffed him on the spot. I was taken to the campus medical office, wrists scraped, knees bruised. But I was alive. And I was no longer silent. Amanda rushed over that night. After hearing what happened, she held my shoulders tight and whispered, "She's desperate, and that's when we need to be the strongest." The incident exploded online. Shanna had filmed the moment she entered the room, and the video spread like wildfire. Within 24 hours, tens of thousands of shares, comments, and analyses flooded every platform. It was no longer just a story of a daughter and her controlling mother. Now, people truly saw what I had been trying to prove for years. I wasn't paranoid. I had been hunted. The press began asking questions about Dr. Grant. Former victims started to speak up. Caroline stayed silent. But I knew behind that silence was a storm waiting to break, and I wouldn't avoid it. I had come too far to turn back. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone in the fight. The courtroom that morning felt especially cold, not from the air conditioning, but from the heavy tension filling the rows of wooden benches, punctuated only by the dry sound of papers turning. I sat between Amanda and a court-appointed social worker, my hands clasped on the gray skirt in my lap. Across the aisle was Caroline in a cream-colored designer coat, her gaze steady, almost pitying, as if she were the most wounded of us all. Presiding was Judge Helen Carter, a woman with neatly tied gray hair and a voice calm but sharp as a blade. Before her lay a thick file stamped urgent, titled Petition for Guardianship of Josephine Brennan, born 2006. On Caroline's side, her attorney was Frank Dillard, a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses, polite in demeanor but with eyes that weighed every detail. He began, Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Caroline Brennan, is the biological mother of Josephine, who has long expressed deep concern for her daughter's mental and physical safety. I raised my head, watching him slowly flip through bolded documents, copies of fabricated psychiatric reports, letters once signed by Dr. Grant, and spliced videos from when I was 14, screaming in the backyard after being locked up for 3 days straight. We submit that Josephine Brennan cannot care for herself. She has a history of emotional disorder, has damaged family property, and is currently living alone in a university setting without the medical supervision she requires, he concluded, turning toward me with a grave expression. Judge Carter nodded and motioned for Amanda to respond. Amanda stood, calmly opening her dark leather case. Your Honor, we submit Josephine's GED certificate, awarded with honors, along with her full scholarship acceptance letter from Lakewood University's School of Visual Arts. Additionally, we present a 187-page handwritten journal detailing how Mrs. Caroline Brennan planned to sustain a system of control over her daughter through unauthorized medical interventions. She walked to the bench, placing down sealed files verified by Investigator Harris. We also present testimony from Miranda Brennan, Caroline's eldest daughter, confirming acts of destruction of personal property and prolonged psychological abuse. Amanda continued, gesturing for Miranda to step onto the witness stand. Miranda wore a sea blue sweater, her hair tied neatly back, her voice trembling but steady. My mother once went through every single painting I had made, carried them into the backyard, and burned them all. She said they were spiritual contamination, that art only led people astray from the moral path. I looked at my sister. Our eyes met for a brief moment, no words exchanged, but enough for me to understand. She wasn't afraid anymore. After Miranda, it was Lucas's turn. He wore a white shirt, shoulders slumped, his hands twisted together, shaking. Amanda stood beside him, gently encouraging, and Lucas began to speak. At first, my mom said it was just to help my sister get back on the right track. She told Miranda and me that we'd get to study abroad if we did well. I didn't know what I was helping with, not until Josephine was forced to take the pills, then locked up. His voice cracked. Amanda gently patted his shoulder, then pulled out a folder of scans. We also submit MRI images of witness Lucas Brennan's right knee, showing joint damage caused by a year of forced physical training under the supervision of Mrs. Caroline, she explained. The air in the courtroom froze. Even Frank Dillard could no longer maintain his earlier composure. He shuffled through documents, glanced at Caroline, and for the first time that morning, I saw her pull out a handkerchief to wipe her forehead. Finally, Judge Carter asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood. No papers, no notes. I didn't even look at Amanda. I simply faced the microphone. Your Honor, I'm not a perfect person. I've been hurt, I've been angry, I've been lost. But I have never been incapable of living on my own. I taught myself, I survived hundreds of hours of forced therapy, I escaped an environment where everything from my heartbeat to my words was monitored. I have friends, I have plans, I have dreams, and what I want most, it isn't revenge, it's the peace to live my life. The room sank into silence. Amanda squeezed my hand gently under the table. I sat back down, my chest pounding but without fear. After nearly an hour of deliberation, Judge Carter returned to the bench. Her voice rang calm but firm. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court denies the guardianship petition filed by Mrs. Caroline Brennan and declares that Josephine Brennan is legally capable of independent living under state law. Furthermore, based on the physical and psychological risks presented, the court issues a 10-year protective order against Mrs. Caroline Brennan, including prohibition of contact or indirect communication of any kind. Caroline shot to her feet, ready to protest, but her attorney pulled her back. Her face drained pale, lips pressed so tightly they turned purple. I looked at her, not triumphant, not broken, just empty. Because after all, what I needed was never for her to lose. What I needed was to live. And now, the court had given me that chance, not just as a ruling, but as a ticket back into freedom. News of the verdict spread faster than I expected. 3 days after the hearing, local papers were running bold headlines. Powerful mother exposed for treating daughter like an experiment. Several TV stations invited Amanda for interviews, and I received emails from victim support organizations asking me to share my story. I declined most of them. I didn't need recognition. I just wanted to breathe quietly, peacefully like any other student. But life didn't give me much time to rest. One crisp November morning, just after I left my applied philosophy class, my phone buzzed nonstop. Amanda's name lit the screen. Caroline has just been officially indicted at the state level for forging medical documents, unlawfully forcing minors to take medication, and colluding with Dr. Grant, she said, her voice steady but lighter. I froze in the hallway, students rushing past, my fingers tightened on my backpack strap. And Dr. Grant? I asked. His license was suspended this morning. The Federal Health Commission has stepped in to investigate. There may be more victims. I was quiet for a long time, then exhaled. Not out of joy, but because something that had pressed on my chest for years had finally been lifted. College life slowly settled into a rhythm. I moved from the dorm into a small rental house with a few other students, just a short walk from campus. I chose to major in psychology. When people asked why, I answered simply, because I want to understand the very things once used to manipulate me. Outside of class, I joined a support group for survivors of psychological abuse in families. We didn't need to say much. Just being there, sitting together in a sunlit room, was enough to ease the weight. Miranda began building her own life too. She found a part-time job at an art supply store in the old district. The owner, an older woman named Eleanor, told me once, "Miranda doesn't say much, but when she draws, she shines." I saw her behind the counter sketching in charcoal, her face calm and focused. She had once feared even her own reflection, but now she walked down the street with her head high. Lucas entered a long-term therapy program for teens who had been forced into harsh family environments. He no longer hid his eyes under a cap or avoided people calling his name. One afternoon, he sent me a picture of his old bike, freshly painted blue, with a short message, "I'm learning to fix what's broken." I read that line over and over until I memorized it. Then one day I received a message from Miranda. "Are you free Saturday night? Lucas will be there too. I want to invite you both for coffee." We met at a small cafe on South Main Street. The place smelled of cinnamon and fresh pastries, warm lights spilling into the cozy room. Lucas arrived early in an olive hoodie, taller than I remembered. Miranda chose a table by the window, where the streetlight fell gently inside. We sat there, talking about the weather, about my classes, about a drawing Miranda was preparing for a student exhibition, about Lucas's 12th therapy session. No one mentioned our mother, no one used the old labels. No more the gifted one, the disordered one, or the failure. Just three young people, once lost, learning how to turn toward the light. I remember one moment when soft acoustic music played in the background. Miranda whispered, "It feels like everything is rising from the ashes now." I didn't answer. I just looked at her, then at Lucas. And I smiled. A few weeks later, in a large lecture hall of the psychology department, Professor Jonathan Kim raised a question. What do you think is the thinnest line between care and control? I listened as classmates gave answers, some theoretical, others emotional. When the professor called my name, my heart thumped, but I stood. No notes, no preparation. Care is when you see someone shivering and hand them a warm sweater. Control is when you force them to wear a sweater in the middle of summer because you think they'll be cold. The hall went silent. Sunlight poured through the left-hand windows, warming my cheek. I stood there, in front of all those eyes, no longer afraid of judgment, no longer pretending. I wasn't labeled, I wasn't caged inside diagnostic boxes anymore. And in that moment, I understood. Freedom isn't about being unchained. It's about living without asking for permission. If you've listened this far, maybe something in this story touched you. Maybe you were once a Josephine, misunderstood and controlled in the name of love. Or maybe you were like Miranda or Lucas, forced to carry the weight of expectations until you forgot who you really were. I tell this story not to reopen wounds, but to say this. No matter how dark the past, we still have the right to step out of it and walk into the light. Freedom is not rebellion, it's the courage to live true to yourself without needing approval. And what about you? Where do you think the line lies between love and control, between care and the theft of choice? I would love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below because maybe your story will give hope to someone who needs it. And if you find stories like this worth listening to, real slices of family life, of bonds that are as painful as they are profound, make sure to follow this channel. There are still so many stories waiting to be told, and I hope we'll meet again on the next journey.